Good morning, friend. We are discussing about the Vision IS Weekly Focus magazine of the 24th session, in which they are giving the week 3rd of the January 2021, and it is the 24th session, and we are starting from the 21st session. But in this session, we are discussing about the international relation with the focus of the economical aspect of the international level organization, that is WTO. Let's see, before introducing India and WTO, is the title of the whole magazine, or the 7 pages that are given by the Vision. Let's see the introduction, what they are talking about. India has proposed a renegotiation upper tariff limit on a certain item at WTO. So the relation, the how we are proceed with this topic with the international relation with India to the WTO is like that. The why is the news, why the focus, the what is the need of this type of 7 pages that are completely regarding the WTO and international relation focusing India with WTO. So the relation and the news is like that. They proposed to India proposed basically to renegotiate. They wanted to renegotiate upper tariff limit on a certain item at WTO. So that's why these are news. This come at a time when the WTO is facing internal and external turbulence in the form of the crisis faced by the affiliated body. Why? How? Because the USA could not appoint or nominate the person in the appellate body, and if the quorum is not completed in appellate body, the hearing is not completed in that body. Emerging trend of deglobalization are started because of the COVID-19 and the protectionist policy of Western world. Because of the industry sector there is very less, and thus they are shifted toward the service sector, and the opportunity that the highest labor intensiveness is reducing. So that is the way, and the compounding effect of the COVID-19 also the reason because of the deglobalization is happening. Basically this scenario present itself both as a challenge and an opportunity for India. So both are the case, because whenever there is a crisis situation, there is a scenario in which you can face a challenge. If you face the challenge completely and successfully, then the opportunity in front of you, and the opportunity in which you are a completely new thing or new member or a new face of you basically. But before we delve into the status of WTO and the prevalent stakes for India, so what is the stake herein for India is that the highest cost benefit analysis, how much we are giving and how much we can get from this. It is important to understand that WTO and that role is supposed to play in a global trade. Has WTO been successful in playing the envisaged role, that the role that is given to them, to him or to it? How has India benefited from the role played by the WTO? How India get benefited because we have giving some of our right also to the WTO, and how we benefited. And whenever we give some right of complete India, or complete comprehensive market of India, it means that we are prejudiced or the bias toward the sovereignty and wanted to give maximum benefit in front of us. Okay, WTO, that were the issue of the remain unresolved, and where does India stand on them? Going forward, what will drive the future of WTO, and step can India from itself can take so that we can safeguard our interest and the legitimacy of WTO basically. In this edition, we try to answer the four side question of these WTO, or these questions that we are discussed. Okay. Let's see, what is World Trade Organization, how did it evolve, and what role it is supposed to play in the global trade. So what is the role they should be played? First thing is that how they are evolved, second thing with time, and how the different responsibilities given to WTO and how WTO are responding to this. Let's see. WTO, World Trade Organization, is the only global international organization that deals with the rules of the trade between the nations. These rules are governed by the number of WTO agreement that various countries are signing to it and processed to it, negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations, which are ratified by the parliaments. It is the successor of the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade that was started in 1947, which is the multilateral free trade agreement that was created in 1947. I already talked about it. GATT grew out of the Bretton Woods Agreement, which had also proposed a specialized agency of United Nations called the International Trade Organization also, which was expected to replace GATT. Although the ITO never materialized, but the GATT still existed, but they have less power, and in 1995 it gave status and it rise to WTO. The GATT act as a provisional agreement and organization liberalizing world trade from 1948 to 1994, in which it play very important role. The evolution of these multilateral trading platform can be traced to the negotiation and outcomes of the continued meeting or round, which plays an important role in shaping the mandate and structure. For example, if we are talking about the Rugby Round, it was started in 1986 by the GATT member itself, where there were calls for a stronger multilateral organization so that we can monitor trade and resolve trade dispute to extend the trading system into several new areas, notably to trade in service and intellectual property, and to perform trade in sensitive sector like agriculture and textile, because it has a demand driven sector and all country could not have resources to go with it. For example, Saudi Arabia should not go for the agriculture because the arid land. Israel, for example, if they although developed the new technology, but at the earliest phase when the technology is come up, the gestation period of that thing, the whole things are governed by WTO agreement because of the resource crunch and dependency on other different resources and our need. Okay, on its completion in 1994, the WTO came into being and began organization and operation in 1995. The establishment of WTO integrated several other agreements in addition to the ones under GATT. So GATT के जितने भी एग्रीमेंट हमारे थे WTO के साथ उरुग्वे राउंड का भी हमने ऐड कर दिया. उसकी वजह से WTO एक न्यू टाइप से, एक न्यू मेंबर की तरफ उभर कर आया है, एक न्यू ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की तरफ से उभर कर आया है. इन्होंने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले किया, तो ये इनका कहने का मतलब है. लेट्स सी अबाउट द GATTs, General Agreement on Trade in Service, because our service sector is much more focused, much more has a more compatible basically, but the service sector has a different negotiation or the type of a round basically in which they have some rules and regulation how we can proceed it with that at international level in a very convenient administrative and a single uniformity there, which attempt to supervise and stabilize trade in services. So GATS है, तो services there, the main focus is service there. So we have to regulate and negotiate with the service in this type of agreement. Next is the agreement on trade related aspect of intellectual property right, because Western world are much more focused where the resource and development, basically research and development are much more high as compared to the lower or the in Eastern country basically. So they wanted to this agreement and they come up with the agreement on trade related aspect on intellectual property right, that is TRIPS, which improve protection of intellectual property across the border. Number 3 is understanding of rules and procedure governing the settlement of dispute, which established rule for resolving conflict between the member. Next is the trade policy review mechanism that has documented national trade policy and assess their conformity with WTO rule. Next is the Doha round. Doha round is, I think that is the 8th round. Let's see. After the Rugby round, another round of negotiation was adopted, namely Doha round or Doha agreement इसको कहा जाता है, और Doha development agenda in the 4th ministerial conference. In the first, that is the Uruguay, but it is the 4th, but it is important. Second, third is not materialized basically, and it does not come up with the great higher priority to the eastern country or that affect the India. So that's why we are not reading it, but we are focused on the 4th ministerial conferences because of the necessity and significance for India. It cover about 20 areas of trade such as agriculture, services, trade and environment, geographical indication, etc. Since then, the negotiation at all ministerial conferences have centered around the reaching consensus on this agenda. So that is important because the negotiation and the simple guidelines are given, but the consensus is not made by the Western world and the Eastern world or the simple developing and developed country. So that's why the whole focus after this meeting, other meeting are dependent upon Doha round because of the negotiation and the rules and regulation that they are propounded by these developing country, but developed country are not make the consensus because of this because they are hurting their interest basically. The primary aim of the agenda is to provide the weight to priorities of the less developed countries, so that's why the consensus is not made basically. Following can be cited as the key development in the negotiation world. For example, the agenda that has been discussed in several ministerial conference and WTO meeting before negotiating were restored in 2008. This was due to issue related to agriculture export subsidies. So developed country and developing country are not at the same par at this proposal. Access to patented medicine and difference in the extent of the special and differential treatment provided to the developing country. So that is the main focus there. Next, attempt to revive these negotiation. Next is the bail package. The package include provision for lowering import tariff. So always all country wanted that the tariff of one country to the other country should be less so that their export can be enhanced and the dollar and the remittances that they get is higher. And agriculture subsidies with the aim to provide more market access to developing countries, because developing countries are much more focused and much more dependent on the agriculture product, but at for example in USA the agriculture sector is very less, I think 1 or 2% carry the agriculture sector. So that's why they are making the profit by these when the product is at when the product is at international level, when the product of these country are come at the international, because the productivity and efficiency and mechanization of the agriculture there and the machine intensive agricultural activity found there in a high number as compared to agriculture that are found in developing country, and because of this mismatch the price of the production is very less in developed country. So that's the sufferer is agriculture economy of the developing country where at the initial stage of developing, right? The clause temporarily or stipulated that no country would be legally barred from the food security program for its own people even if the subsidy breached the limit specified in WTO agreement on agriculture. So यहाँ पे जो एक क्लॉज था उसको एग्जेम्प्ट करके रखा गया कि एग्रीकल्चर के सेक्टर में, क्योंकि डेवलपिंग कंट्री आज डिपेंडेंट रहती है एग्रीकल्चर के ऊपर, तो उस पे कोई भी कंसेसेस नहीं बिल्ड किया गया और जो भी जितना भी फूड सिक्योरिटी देना चाहता है तो दे सकता था. तो इसका यही मतलब निकला था बाली पैकेज में, और ये भी आई थिंक 7th और 8th नेगोशिएशन स्टार्ट हो गई थी. Anyway, Nairobi package. The package is on a similar line to the Bali package, in which we are highlighting that developing nation will be able to use the special safeguard mechanism for agriculture product, because I already told the reason. So it is a type of a different manifestation of the same product or the same sector of the economy that the consensus between the developing and developed country are not reached. The SSM allow developing country to charge additionally safeguard duties in case of the abnormal rise in import in the event of the entry of abnormal cheap import. The primary objective of WTO is to supervise and liberalize world trade. So that is the main aim. The primary objective of WTO is to supervise and liberalize the world trade. In other words, to move towards this objective, WTO abides by the two key principles. First, the commitment to openness. So they wanted that the openness of all the country would be there, which implies reduction of the tariffs at the not only in developing country but also in a developed country. They wanted of tariff as well as the limiting quotas, subsidies and other barrier to trade. And secondly, no discrimination. So first is committedness to the openness, that they are wanted to reduce the tariff and increase the incentivization to the product there. Next, the no discrimination nature of the WTO member, that must treat trade with all member equally. The objective of liberalization, the application of these principles land broadly three purposes to WTO vis-a-vis global trade. So the acting as a let's see, we discussed the Nairobi package. The Nairobi package I already talked it about. That is the package that is between the developing country and developed country, the negotiation between the two on the agricultural product. And the key highlight is that the developing nation will be able to use the special safeguard mechanism for agriculture product. So by this the consensus is made, but the official is not made. Matlab, the consensus is made between the developing country. If the unity is there in developing country, there is no reason to exempt this unity by the developed country. That is the main theme here, but the main focus here is that the safeguard mechanism is given to the developing country, that they can give the subsidies and the help to the farmers so that they can be used in the development process of the agriculture product by the government help, through the government help basically. The SSM allow developing the safeguard standard, basically developing country to charge additional safeguard duty in case of an abnormal rise if import or in event of entry abnormality cheap market import. So basically this is the thing, that whenever the cheap product from the international market from any of the country at the world level is coming in the host country where the import product is very less value, so the country has an sovereignty completely on that matter, that they can stop these things under the WTO agreement itself. Otherwise it is not allowed as per the WTO rules, that is a member of the country, right? The primary objective of WTO is to supervise and liberalize the world trade. In order to move towards its objective, WTO abides by the key principle. That is, the first is the commitment to the openness, I already discussed it about, and non-discrimination mechanism between the country. Next, the acting as a single international forum for regulating the global trade. I already talked about these things. Next, the protecting the interests of the small and weaker country from the trade discrimination, and this is incentivized through the export incentivization theme of the developed countries, so that they can produce more and export more, and the developing state developed or underdeveloped status can be changed to the developing status. So that is the thing there. The WTO most favored nation as a favorite treatment article stipulate that each WTO member must grant equal market access to all the other member, and that both domestic and foreign supplier must be treated equally. So that is the theme of WTO. But in the developed country or underdeveloped country, that the situation is somewhat different. How it be different? Because of the underdeveloped nature, because the raw material that they are just exporting, not any value addition is done by them. This protects the vulnerability entities from the exploitation, and thus indirectly encourage that the participation and increasing their confidence in the system. Next, the bulwark. Bulwark is nothing but a strong point, strengthening point of the globalized world order is the aim of WTO, that together with the Bretton Woods institution, that the International Monetary Fund and World Bank play an integral part in creating the globalized world order. In the terms of the trade liberalization, the globalized world order envisions enhanced economic welfare across the global and reduce geopolitical freedom or the relations. Next is has the WTO successful in playing its role? So that is the thing there. That is we have to analyze. See, every aspect of WTO, the objective of WTO, we have to analyze this thing. But everything is not sorted by the international community. And if all these things is sorted, the question is itself different. Let's see. The WTO, as it now stands, has been operational for more than 2 decades. I already talked about 1995. The WTO come arise from the GATT agreement, but ITO agreement of 1945 that does not materialize at that point of time. But WTO in 1995, because of the some rule and because of the Doha Convention and the Nairobi Convention, it become successful because of the consensus between the developing and developed country that has a different pole of the their different of their and different stage of their development. They made the consensus that the big thing and big opportunity of the WTO and big कह सकते हैं कि जो उनकी कामयाबी थी बहुत बड़ी थी इस फेज में. ड्यूरिंग दिस टाइम फॉलोइंग कैन बी साइडेड एज द मेजर अचीवमेंट ऑफ द फॉलोइंग. नंबर फर्स्ट, द वाइड प्रोडक्ट एंड जियोग्राफिकल कवरेज. Yes, that is the case there. The WTO encompass all goods and services, that is the good thing, and intellectual property also that is respected by them and has a provision to respect and appreciate by other developing country that has not interested in them. But by this provision that they can incentivize their industry to go with the research and development and not dependent on the other country to when the obsolete technology that they are getting because of the monopoly of the Western world. Okay, also the number of the member countries and the extent of their participation has grown steadily. The combined share of the intellectual property trade of the WTO member now exceed 90% of the global trade. They increase WTO credibility at a single international regulator. Next is the rapid growth in world trade. Since 1995, the dollar value of the world trade has nearly quadrupled. It means that the trillion, that means it make that various trillion economy at the world level, while the real volume of the world trade has expanded by 2.7 times, which were far outstrip the twofold increment in the world GDP. The primary reason of this is that the average tariff have almost halved from 10.5% to 6.54% during this period. WTO has played a critical role in the tariff reduction. Next is acting as an enabler of a domestic reform. For many economies that joined the WTO after its creation, accession involved far reaction. Acting as an enabler of domestic reform for many economies that has joined the WTO after its creation, accession involved far-reaching reform and market opening commitment that research suggests has been associated with a lasting boost to their national income. Next, the increased economic efficiency via development of the global chain. The predictability of the condition of the market fostered by WTO combined with the imported communication has enabled the rise of the global value chain. Trade with these value chains today account for almost 70% of total mechanism trade. So that is the case. Also, the rise of GVC. GVC is nothing but a global value chain has been a very factor of enabling rapid catch-up of growth in developing economy while facilitating increased purchasing power and consumer choice in whole country. So that is the good and the positive point of WTO, that is created a situation in which the globalized world has make advantage in terms of economy because of the WTO. Despite above achievement, WTO has often been criticized on the ground that it infringes the national sovereignty. I already talked about whenever we give some right to other international body, there is a question of the always be sovereignty and how much sovereignty we are going because of the less bargaining power, and it depend upon the various factors because of the geopolitical issue, international relation, and the good terrorism, bad terrorism, money laundering, various factors come into play. Because of this complexity, we could not even plan the thing basically. Despite above achievement, the WTO has often been criticized on the ground on the infringes upon national sovereignty and promote the interest of large corporations at the expense of the smaller local firms. Also, several environment and labor groups have claimed that the trade liberalization led to environment damage also because of the resource so much exploitation there and harmfulness of the interest of the low-skilled ununionized worker. So that is the case there. So that is the negative point of the WTO basically. The highlight that the vision prepared by WTO may also make some intended consequences also because of the we are just aping, we are just emulate whatever the Western world is doing. So that is not good. We are forgotten our culture, but we are going towards one culture that is nothing but a monoculture. But it is not good for the anything for the economy, political, social fabric basically. Let's see the next thing. In addition to other criticism, the proliferation of issues of the rising trade protectionism that is rising and reverse globalization that is starting in the Western world, basically because of the immigration and refugee, and the protection regarding trade is happening, and increasing geopolitical tension among the major economies has reduced WTO institution importance. It in fact has reduced the confidence of smaller countries in WTO and also blocked WTO's role in furthering a more globalized world. So that is the case there. How has India benefited from the role played by WTO? तो किस तरीके से इंडिया को बेनिफिट हुआ है कि जिस तरीके से हमने इंडिया ने इसमें मेंबर बनने के बाद क्या बेनिफिट पाया. बेसिकली इंडिया ज्वाइन WTO फ्रॉम द वेरी बिगिनिंग इन 1995 itself when the WTO is arised or the envisaged. The timing coincide with the domestic economic changes also undertaking the countries post the liberalization reform of 1991. So it is the handy, basically the liberalization effect of 1991 is become an handy for India to take advantage of WTO, right? The synchronization between the opening of domestic and global economy led to the following benefit for it. Number first is the rise in export. That is the case there. Rise in export, according to some studies or the social studies, basically India's export almost doubled in less than a decade. So that is the tremendous growth basically, and it is a positive sign towards our economy, going up from the 26.33 billion in 1994 in 51 about in 2002 to 2003. For example, the multi-fiber agreement, for example, of WTO helped increase market access for India in the textile and clothing trade around the world. Next, the growth in export of the software services also, because of the liberalization of trade in services, India become a market for the BPO and outsourcing from the world, external world. Next is the employment generation. As we are know very well, global trade on the principle of the comparative advantage, as the BPO are shifting, cost effectiveness, low, higher opportunity, lower opportunity shifted from that country to our country. So that is the leverage that we are getting because of the less labor and abundant labor and less tightening of the labor laws, right? For example, if we are talking about the labor intensive sector like the textile, apparel, leather and leather product and food, beverage and tobacco, we are exporting much higher as compared to other where the skill is less. Next is the poverty alleviation. Whenever there is a trade growth in any economy, the first impact of any of the economic activity when rising is the reduction in the poverty. A liberal intellectual property that is essential for the economic growth positively celebrated the alleviation of the poverty, and the positive sign in any economy is that they are reducing their poverty. For instance, there has been a sharp decline in poverty rates from post 1990, which is the coincided with the global trade and globalization and improving the domestic growth and the liberal policies and privatization that we are accepting now. And at that point of time, basically 1991, what are the issues that remain unresolved in WTO negotiation and where does India stand for on them? So what is the issue? Number first issue is the agriculture subsidies. I already talked it about. WTO views India's minimum spot price that mechanism is a type of a trade distorting measure and places it under the amber box provision of WTO, meaning it has to be capped at 10% of the value of concerned product. Next is the India has questioned this approach on the various count. So the primary agenda for the MSP and other price support mechanism is not just export promotion, but we wanted to give various subsidies to the farmer. First thing, second thing is the food security is the main issue there. If the government is not procuring these product from the agriculture, but how we can keep the hunger out of way. Next is the India has been disrupting the calculation methodology under the agreement on agriculture WTO, as only under the subsidy cap is based on the food grain price level of the 1986, and whereas the current prices are substantially higher. So the base year basically India is questioning there. Next, the India has pointed out that the absolute sense that developing country like the USA provide almost 90% higher of the world price distorting subsidies under the amber box, that we are not because of the high economy and 10% of GDP. GDP is nothing but that depend upon the country size. Next, apart from the price support subsidy, India also provides farm input subsidies also, for example the seeds, fertilizers, water subsidy, electricity subsidy, etc. Next is the fisheries subsidies also be provided. The WTO has been negotiating a pact which aim to eliminate the harmful fisheries subsidy, estimated that is about 14 to 20.5 billion separately. This is in line with the effort to achieve the sustainable development because of the exploitation of the water and marine resources there, and it is not good for the economy and for the water. But the subsidies that are targeted include the subsidies for the fishing vessels, net fuel and other inputs offered to poor fisheries in developing countries. Next, the India's demand that those who have provided huge subsidy leading to the overfishing and overcapacity should be take higher cuts in the subsidy, and capacity in certain developing countries should be exempted from commitment to eliminate fisheries subsidy. So that is the case there. Let's see the domestic support that we are providing in under the boxes. Number 4, in WTO terminology, subsidies in general are identified by the boxes. Basically, first is the green, that they are green signal to them and that they are permitted in the economy. Next is the amber box, that the slow down with the time phase manner, it should be cut it down. Third is the blue box, that whenever amber box with condition that are contained in the blue box. Basically, that is related to the agriculture subsidy, because agriculture is the base of any of the activity. First thing, second thing, it is important, it is the need of the every person there. Next, first is the amber box. Nearly all sport boxes measures considered to distort production and trade with some expectation fall into the amber box. These include the measures to sport prices or subsidy directly related to the production quantity. Next, these sport are subject to limits called the minimals level, which generally caps such sport at 5% of the agriculture production for developed country and 10% for the developing country. Next is the blue box. Any sport that would normally be in the amber box is placed in the blue box if the sport also requires farmer to limit production. Next is the green box. Green box is nothing but that not subsidized or not distort the trade or at most cause minimal distortion. That is the case in the green box. And development box is there is a type of 4 box, but that development box is nothing but providing the infrastructure facility to the farmer so that they can be enhanced. Let's see the type of the sport that fits into the development category or measure of the assistance that is given by the government to the people there, whether direct or the indirect, designed to encourage and agriculture and the rural development that are integral part of the development program of any developing countries. India demand that the most of those who provide huge subsidies leading to the overfishing and overcapacity should take higher cuts in subsidies and capacity, and certain developing countries should be exempted from the commitment to eliminate fishery subsidy because of the development. See, it depends upon the various factors. It is not like that just if, for example, in Japan there is a much higher dependency, their culture dependent on the marine fisheries type of a thing because of the proximity to the sea level and the shape of their geography. But if we take the example of the India, that is a huge country basically, and that has the plain area also in a much more higher as compared to the peninsula, and that is affected by the marine type of a coast thing, right? So we can say that we have a diversified resources, but where the diversity of the resources is in the terms of the food security is not found there. They completely depend on the marine situation, and WTO should respect this type of exemption, and that is given in case of the fishes. In many countries, for example, Tapu contain vanilla country, Mauritius, Maldives, like of countries that they are found in the Indian Ocean, that is much more dependent upon them, right? Next is the movement of the labor. Let's see the India has been disrupting the calculation methodology under the agreement. Okay, I already talked it about movement of labor. The movement of professionals basically from the developing country is constrained by a number of the factors such as the lack of a specific sector communities, lack of the mutant recognition of the qualification, lack of transparency and administration of a visa regime, etc. Next, India has therefore sought liberalization of the movement of the professional through removal of the such concern, because we have a population, we have a skilled population, and we wanted to the removal of these type of restriction visa on the immigrant. Basically, COVID-19, the TRIPS agreement, what is it? The proposal was raised by India and South Africa to temporarily suspend the intellectual property right in case of the vaccine development of COVID-19, because of the effectiveness not only to the one country, but it affects all over the world. That includes waiving protection for the patent as been done for HIV treatment. So, support of the waivers, including the several developing countries and NGO also like the MSF, that is the Doctor Without Border, or the Medicine Sans Foundation, argue that rich countries like USA, EU and Canada are blocking access to the critical medicine allegedly for the extracting more profit. So that is the case, but they are also behind their own limitedness because of the privatization that are happening in this country, where the private people are going for the research and development and they are giving, not the government basically. So that's why developed country along with the pharmaceutical companies have argued that such a move would create a wrong precedence and jeopardize future medicinal innovation, making it more valuable to other diseases. So that's the case because of the interdependence and the faithfulness that were earlier created, but after that they are not created. So next is the access to affordable vaccine and medicine. According to the medicines at price patient can afford has been a recurrent concern for the global community ever since the adoption of the TRIPS agreement, which protect or extend protection to the pharmaceutical patent. Although safeguards like compulsory licensing, price control and parallel import are present to address this concern, but over time it is seen that it has been difficult to avail this exemption. India being a large generic drug industry and has been several issues balancing the public health and consumer patent protection under the TRIPS agreement. Let's see the next thing. India has urged the WTO member to adopt a waiver and a permanent revision to the TRIPS agreement in order to find a solution so that they can swiftly and expeditiously export or to the pharmaceutical product produced under the compulsory license. This revision will not only affect India but also have a global impact as India accounts for about 20% of the world generic medicine production. Next, the non-tariff barrier to trade. These include technical barrier to trade, TBT, and sanitary and phytosanitary measures, SPS. Issues highlighting in this regard include the irrelevance of the foreign standards to the local condition, the lack of a timely and adequate information, consequent transaction costs, the difficulty in understanding the requirement and certain data arise from the rapidly changing requirement and overseas market. India has been urging toward the rationalization strategy of these non-tariff barriers. Next is the negotiation of the non-trade issues. Developed countries are pushing for incorporation of non-trade issues like environment and labor standard of the negotiation. The argument put forth by them is that the production of the products in developing countries are not being done under the environment and the labor law, so that they are restricting themselves our product. Basically, that is not good for the exporter, and because of the unavailability and unawareness of the resources and the input to the farmer, that these problems are creating. India has started at for the time being, non-trade must be completely kept out of the negotiation table. Recognition of geographical indication, GI recognition is there. The current trading arrangement does not recognize the GI tag and does not provide the associated benefit domestically provided to good. It decreases the marketability of the product in the global market. India suggests extension of the higher level of the protection to the geographical indication for products like basmati rice, Darjeeling tea, Alfonso mango at par with the provided to the wines and the spirit under the TRIPS agreement. Next, the investment facilitation. India has its own investment model, which does not allow multinational companies to take the government to international courts before it has sought to recourse to the domestic dispute settlement. So that is the case there. India has its own investment model, which does not allow multinational companies to take the government to international court before it has sought recourse through our domestic dispute mechanism for a period of at least 5 years. This clause has been contended at a various forums, so that is the problematic issue for India, because we do not want it to treat at the international level because of the uncertainty and because of the they do not understand the Indians and Indian market in a much more better way. India argued that the developing countries should be given flexibility so that we can application for the TRIPS agreement on trade-related investment measure in domestic policy while permitting foreign investment. Next, the e-commerce. Almost 75 countries have agreed to comments enforce talks and global e-commerce rules, but these talks are currently happening outside the ambit of WTO, thus generating two problems. All the members are not participating in the discussion, also thus would bypass the discussion procedure established at the WTO. India has stated that such talk can obligate progress or may pending issues on the Doha development agenda, and any e-commerce talks that is regarding the WTO original digital trade agenda of 1998. Next is the pluralistic and plurilateral negotiation instead of the multilateral negotiation. Several reports have suggested that the current deadlock on the issues of subsidies, inclusion of the new item spectrum, should be approached in a pluralistic manner within a subgroup of the country. Multilateral negotiations are becoming difficult. This approach may end up violating the non-discrimination principle of WTO. India has consistently taken the stand that the launch of any new round of talks should depend on a full convergence on the views amongst the entire WTO member country. Next is what are the factors currently affecting the working WTO with the potential bearing on its future. So that is the case how the future proceed because of the achievement that they are going through. Second thing, but the hurdles because of the known consensus made by the developing and developed and not interested in make the consensus between the developing and developed country. So that is the case, but there is a potentiality that they cannot work as earlier that can be done because of the COVID-19, the impact of the COVID-19 on the economy and immigration rules and the type of terrorism and the political instability and the right-wing extremism that arise around the world. So that is the case that we could not it make the WTO irrelevant for the even some point of time. It mean that it could not do good work. Next is the newer area of the discussion coming to the force, such as e-commerce and the rules of MSME, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises, all of which have a huge stake for both developing and developed country. As a result, the current doctrines, procedure and methodology have to be revised to incorporate negotiation positive in these new areas. Next is the changed global economic distribution. During the Rugby Round for the negotiation from 1986 to 1993, which resulted in the formulation of the WTO. Developing country, including India, did not play a substantial role due to their limited participation. First thing, but now developing country has a large role in trading. First thing. Number second, they know about their position. Number second thing. Number third thing, the purchasing power of all the country now are increasing, so they have larger say, and because of the adult franchise, not at demanding at the national level, but at the international level, that they are demanding that the one country should have one vote. So the positivity, the environment that is given, the freedom and equity that is provided to them, and the sovereignty that is lessened. Contact here. As a result, the operational framework of the WTO needs to be revised to take into account the change because of the economic balance is found in the country. Next is the emerging trade with war between the China and USA. The emerging trade war between the USA and China must manifest discrimination, imposition of tariff with blatantly violate WTO rules, so that is not good. And next is the dysfunction of the WTO applied because of the USA USA provide obstruction to new appointment to the appellate body, and it become a dysfunctional because of that is not provided the quorum to make the decision there. Next is the move toward the bilateral regional pluralistic trading regime. For example, there is a various groups at the smaller level where the WTO is irrelevant there because of their own free trade agreement, and other country are not benefiting because of this thing, and one country are favoring. So that is the bluntly offer the discrimination there against the WTO. Next, the effect of COVID-19 pandemic. These have been disruption in the global supply chain, and the COVID-19 pandemic has forced countries to impose comprehensive export bans and restrictions. As a result, there is a potential for more trade dispute to arise in the future. In the current environment, the potential role WTO can play in this dispute remains skeptical. Next is the threat of wanting of the globalization. For example, there is a chance of the waning of the globalization. As already suggested around that deglobalization are happening because of the COVID-19. The WTO is one of the primary enablers of the globalization. As the global tendencies shift toward deglobalization and the reverse globalization, thus will further reduce the international relevance of WTO as an institution. The developments indicate towards the scenario where WTO may experience a structural change from within, or the role played by WTO and will gradually shift to other mechanisms. In either case, the global trading regime will experience drastic change. What step can India take to safeguard its interests? Number first is institutionally linking national goals with the global level goals. So it is very important for us that we are providing institutional linking national goals so that we can give to the global goals. So that is the thing. This will provide India with an opportunity to structurally resolve the perennial dichotomy of the national goal, that is the versus international commitment. For example, India can advocate for the creating a special safeguard mechanism for protecting the interest of the. Let's see what can step India to safeguard its interest. Number first, the institutional linking national goal with the global goal. So it is very important that, for example, sustainable development goal, we should make our goal in aligned with the global goal, so that we can reach whatever the Western world are reached there. This will provide India with an opportunity to structurally resolve the perennial dichotomy of national goal versus international commitment. For example, India can advocate a special safeguard mechanism for protecting the interest of our small and marginal farmer linked with the objective of achieving the SDGs. So that is the case with the effort of these should be recognized at the world level, and we are appreciated by these type of reform that if we are made, and if we are basically successfully made, and provide other country to opportunity to learn from us. Next is the self-balance. Balancing is important because of the self-sufficiency and comparative advantage that we can take it from because of our geography, topography there. The idea of self-reliance is the Atmanirbhar Bharat will provide India will again bargaining power vis-a-vis the global trade, but this is self-sufficiency needed to be accompanied with the capacity development and resource allocation in area within India has a comparative advantage. For example, labor-intensive sector, whatever we have a strengthened point, we should be much more strengthened there. For example, India is not a party to either the plurilateral trade in services agreement, so it should be our responsibility regarding to make the part of it. Pluralistic trade in services agreement or the information technology agreement being negotiated at WTO, India would revisit both these agreements and see how leverage and huge strength can we give because if we adopted these things. Next is the building the geopolitical capital. For example, changing global trading regime will simultaneously be accompanied by rearrangement of the geopolitical and geoeconomical linkage. India can capitalize these opportunity by reaching out to the country and create capital for potential negotiation in the future. Next is that this may also be helpful in enhancing the market access and strengthening India's global position in case of the parallel agreement have to be made along-wide WTO. Next is the proactive role in emerging areas. Clear domestic policy accompanied with the unambiguous international stance on emerging areas will create a basic global framework which is acceptable to India. For example, playing a proactive role in negotiation, trade, in e-commerce, etc. Next is the preferring WTO reform over the method like trading bloc. The rules-oriented nature of WTO with the principle like non-discrimination built into it suited for a developing country like India. As India both should push towards reform within the WTO framework to strengthen its role globally. Since India may not have the similar negotiation leverage in multilateral trade bloc outside WTO has observed during the RCEP negotiation. Next is the developing reform, domestic reform. Addressing the structural issues in the economy such as the logistic inefficiency, poor ease of the doing business would prepare the economy better for a global competition and pave the way for its further opening of our economy. For example, reform in telecommunication 1990 and large scale reduction in cost communication in India, and it benefited nowadays because our package of the net is very less as compared to the Canada, because my friend is saying like that. Next, the while WTO may not have achieved much by way of forward movement in India, world which is surcharged with the competition, one-upmanship and call for protectionism, its mere presence as a reference has been comforting. But if the WTO has an institution and all the principle that it stands for, it is to survive and move ahead. There should be no scope for the rigidity at any part of the country, because every country has a different stage of the development or group of the country. Negotiation, even in cumbersome, painstaking and incremental, can be the only solution. As far as India is concerned, it makes sense to put its weight behind reformation of WTO, but simultaneously pursue institutional capacity to build in both domestic and a global level. Also, the situation is ripe for India to assert its role in a global trade opportunity. If appropriately capitalized, could drastically improve India's global standing at the world level. Next thing that we are today now discussing, the whole whatever we are discussing about, let's say the Indian World Trade Organization, World Trade, simple glimpse of things whatever we are discussing, or the short summary type is given in the vision itself. Next, the WTO is the only global international organization that dealing with the rules of the trade within the nation. It is the success of the general agreement on a tariff and trade. The WTO has evolved through negotiation rounds. Number first, the Rugby Round 1986 to 1994. After the Rugby Round negotiation, WTO come into being in 1995. It is being that there are several other agreements like GATS, agreement on TRIPS, understanding the rules and procedure governing the settlement of the dispute and trade policy review mechanism. Next is the Doha round of 2001 that is adopted for the 4th minister level in 2001, and it is the 20 area of trade that is related to the agriculture, service trade and environment, geography, indicator, etc. That is the key factor there. The negotiation was stalled in 2008 due to the issue regarding the agriculture subsidies, and that is not consensus made between the developing and developed countries. Attempt has been made to revive the negotiation between developed and developing countries through various initiatives like Bali Pact and Nairobi Pact. The WTO played broadly three major roles with world trade. First is acting as a single market and as the international forum for regulating the global trade. Next is protecting the interests of the small and weak countries from trade discrimination. Next is the acting as a bulwark for the moving toward the globalized world order. So it is very important for us to make the economically globalized world. Number first, there are unresolved issue in negotiation and India's stand on them. Number first, India's subsidies issues is there: fisheries subsidy, movement of labor, access to affordable medicine, non-tariff barrier to trade, negotiation on non-trade issues, also investment facilitation. Next is the success for WTO in this role. Number first, the wide coverage है, global trade acceleration is happening. Because of this, poverty is elevated and domestic efficiency and reforms is found around the world. Because of the competency, if they can made, then they can be really be benefited, and it is the benefited at every people there. So it is a positive trend that can be seen at the world level. So that is the quite important basic rule. If we wanted to go by this rule, we surely be benefited in the long term, right? For India, for example, India's export almost doubled in the less than a decade. Software services, due to the growth of the labor intensive, poverty elevation is found there. Next is the factor currently affecting the WTO with the potential bearing if in the future. First is the newer area of our discussion. For example, e-commerce has changed global economic distribution from 1995 to the today's developing countries. Emerging trade war between the two major economy of the China and USA, for example. Next, the WTO appellate body, because the dysfunctionality that we can easily be found. Next, the move toward the bilateral, regional and pluralistic trading regime such as the RCEP, that is not good for the WTO because it questions the whole WTO as a unit that binding the world together. The effect of the COVID-19 has permanently disrupted some global supply chains, so that should be not there, but it should be there, and it justify whatever the changes should be occurred in the future in the WTO. Threat of the waning of the globalization and deglobalization that are found around the world and protectionist policy of the developed country. Step that India can be take to safeguard its interest. Number first, the institutionally linking national goals with the global goals. Number second, the balance between the self-sufficiency and the comparative advantage wherever we can take it because of the huge labor market that is found in India. Next, the building geographical capital that has be better transition to a changing global trading scenario. Next, the playing protective role in emerging areas like e-commerce, preferring WTO form over other methods like trading blocks to safeguard non-discrimination equity in a global trade. Next, the focusing on domestic reform alongside engaging in a global trade that is economically globally competitive outside that is quite important by